Welcome to the Research Like a Pro question and answer series. Today, Diana Elder is going to talk about analyzing birth and death information from a headstone. And one of our Research Like a Pro course members submitted a question about using a derivative source that lists the birth and death information for one of her ancestors. And the information conflicted with other records that were had by the family. So Diana does a deep dive into finding more original sources to analyze and when the headstone is illegible, what to do next, how to find more information, and analyzing the information and the source and trying to figure out what the most reliable information is. This is an excerpt from our recent monthly office hours in the Research Like a Pro online course, and hopefully this will be a helpful session for you.
Okay, so we have another fun question, super interesting. And this one is all about John hates his cemetery record. And it says, I found a possible birth date for my research subject, John. I first discovered this on a document that my cousin printed out during his own previous research, and I took a picture of it when I visited him in June 2025. Okay, so here we have got some derivative records we're going to look at and try to figure out what to do with this. So here is the document over here that the cousin did a printout, and it didn't cite the website or the URL that I could see on what was given to me, but it does have a date. And then this is the picture, which is awesome. And this is what it says about John. We've got his birthday, and we've got his death date, and then we've got Josephine's birthday and death date as well. So the first question is, how do we cite something like this where it's, we've taken a picture of it and somebody else had printed it out? Well, how in the world can we do a citation for that? So I gave it a shot and put, first of all, the title here, the H's for the Freedom's headstones. So I put that in quotes as the title. And then the specific item was John hates, and I just put his birth year and death year there in parentheses. And I tried to describe it, a printout in possession of John Doe. Would be the cousin's name, and then you could put the address if it's just for your own use, or the city and state. And then the printout was dated 28 June 2010. It was no URL, so I just put unknown website. So that is what I came up with for the first layer, which was describing this document. And then the second layer was all about the fact that it was a photograph of that. So the photo of the printout by Jane Smith, our submitter, and the day was 25 June 2025 and taken at the home of John Doe. So now we have a description of how Jane was able to get a copy of that. So, sometimes we have these items in our paper files and we just really do not know much about them. We can't remember where we got them. And we just describe it the best we can, thinking of the 5 questions: who created it, what is it, where is it, wherein is it? And sometimes we just simply cannot come up with all the answers. So we do our best, just like I didn't know about the unknown website, didn't know where it actually came from. So we do our best, and we can put something together that we could use in our research report. Maybe we're doing background information and we're saying, this is what I had at the beginning of my project. And then you could say, I had this printout and it got me started. And then you would use something like this for your citations. So it's just good to practice doing these types of citations, even though you may feel a little unclear about what to include in them. Now, the interesting thing was that going online, it looked like the same information on a new website. And so it's Headstones at Freedom Cemetery, and you just click on whichever letter you're looking at. When we look at the H's, we have got, there's John and there's Josephine, and it's the exact same information as was on this one. So it looks like the website was just redone it was 2010 for this, and then this is more recent. And they've got kind of a fun background in the back now. And it has the information on both of them. The headstones were read in 1997 by Carmela Krantz and her friend Penny Lemon. So this lets us know when someone actually went to the cemetery and went through it reading the headstones, which is really good information. And then there's actually a URL here that could be included in the citation for this information. So some conflicts that we looked at, that there's only one John and Josephine Hates, and the spelling. So this is one of those things that generally the family spells it with the H-E-I, but it looks like the headstone was spelled H-A-I. Is this the same person? And when we have something like this, it can be tricky because we may not want to think that the name was ever spelled differently, but when you think about how somebody maybe said it, or accents or such, or even just the way the family spelled it versus, sometimes they spelled it one way, sometimes they spelled it another way. And so, in my opinion, that's not a big conflict, but you could put all the different instances and just note that the name is spelled multiple ways. And I often will do that in a report or even a proof argument. Say the name is spelled, this way, this way. There could be other spellings too. And then you could say, but for the purpose of this report, we're going to spell it. And then you choose what you want to spell it. If you're going to do the HI spelling, if that's your preferred, you just spell it like that. And then you would say something like, but when quoting a record, we'll use the spelling as in the record. So that's how you get around spelling issues like that. Now, another challenging thing is the death date for John. So the person submitting this question said that it's incorrect because the family, or there's the belief that he died on August 22nd, 1890, but the death date here says that he died on April 22nd, 1890. So we've got a 4 versus an 8. So that's a bit of a conflict. And we can assume it's a transcribing mistake. The birth and death, Josephine's birth and probably death information look correct. So what else can we learn about this? We need a little bit more, because what kind of a source is this? This one is derivative. Somebody is putting it up on a website. So, is there an error of just typing it in, or was it a transcribing error? We want to try to get more original. Now, there's another source that we could look at, and this is from a website called Missouri Cemetery Inscription Sources. And this one shows where for Frieden Cemetery, there are some quarterlies that have been written. And so one was from 1991, one was from 1976, and one 1982. And so these maybe are additional views of the headstones. Maybe someone else went in and did a review of it. Until you go get the quarterly, you don't know what that article is going to be about. Or perhaps it's just going to be informational about the history of it, but that would be good to track down as well. So the question was, even though they're dated 91, 76, and 82, would any information be more valid than the work that Carmela and Penny created? Because they created theirs in 1997. So with headstones, I always like to look for the very earliest readings because they tend to be more accurate. Headstones start eroding, and sometimes what someone could read 20 years before is better than what somebody can read, 20 or 30 years later. So I like to try to find the earliest reading of it, especially if the headstone now is not very legible. So let's see what it looks like now. So here's the headstone. This is on Find a Grave. And we'll blow it up just a little bit. And you can see that it does say the John, and it's just really kind of eroded, kind of difficult to read there. And especially when you get down here to the specifics about the the dates. So there are things you could do. You could go in person, and I know people have put like aluminum foil over the top and then tried to do a rubbing. You need to be careful with making the headstone worse by whatever you do. You'd want to be really careful about what you did. But if you went in person, you perhaps could figure it out and see what you think. Now, we have got Find a Grave, a memorial that states the 22 August 1890, and this was apparently created by the person who took the photo. So we reached out to Susan Ing within the message system to get more information, and she's the one credited with taking the tombstone photo. But I don't believe she had anything more than this. So she probably took, this was her idea of what it said. Okay, so we've got a few different things to think about here. The question is, even though there's a mistake listed in the death date for John, can we take his birth date as a good possibility in lieu of any birth certificate found to date? So what are the different sources we've got for the birth and the death dates? Well, we have the headstone photo. So the headstone is an original source, but the photo, we can't really read it. So that is a conflict to work on that we'd have to worry about. And then the birth date, who's the informant for the birth date on the headstone? Who gave that? Well, it was probably the family. The family had to pay for the headstone, and they would not have been present at his birth unless it was a mother, and he died older, so I'm sure it probably wasn't the mother. Who knows? Maybe it was. But we probably secondary information. Now, the death date, we also don't know who gave that, but if it was family, then they probably knew the death date. So that would be good information. So this is our original source, the most important source to really make sure we've nailed down accurate information from that headstone. But we also have this Find a Grave memorial, and it's a derivative source that someone wrote. It could be based on the headstone, and it looked like Susan, who took the headstone, was the informant for the memorial. So for the birth date, she's, that secondary information still, she's taking what she can see on the headstone, which still would be given by somebody who wasn't at his birth. And then the death date, I probably should have put primary information here too, because we can say that whoever created the headstone probably knew his death date. However, however, sometimes these tombstones or headstones are erected by family members much later, and so they don't have direct evidence. So those are always a little bit tricky to figure out. And then we have that website that features the headstone reading by Carmela and Penny. Doesn't have the picture, just has what they read. And that's a derivative source. They went around reading the original and made a copy of it, a transcript. And so again, the birth date, we don't know who gave the birth, but it was probably secondary information. They were told his birth date. He was told his birth date, and then the death date could be primary. So, you can see the information doesn't really change. We just think about the source, and the source is what is a little bit different. So we've got a couple of derivatives, and we've got the original. So what do we do with this analysis? Well, I would review the quarterlies and get the earliest reading possible to see if it was maybe more legible back when they did the reading. You could also go look for any other records like the cemetery records. It looked like the cemetery was still burying people. They maybe would have records that actually would give the real, the for sure birth date. And then you could look for obituaries, maybe a funeral home, church record, death certificate to try to find more information.